Number 10. St. Ignatius Hospital. The St. Ignatius Hospital is a derelict house of horrors. On the plaque outside the hospital, there's a Latin inscription that roughly translates to, "The love of Christ impels us." A little too reminiscent of The Exorcist, if you ask us. The building was established in 1982 as a Catholic hospital in Colfax, Washington. It remained operational until 1964, when it was simply too outdated to keep functional. The property then turned into an assisted living home until the year 2000. After that, it was shut down and abandoned. The hospital remained abandoned until 2015, when it opened for public tours based on the outrageous claims that there are ghosts living inside. We don't know exactly whose ghosts these are or where exactly they came from, but the hospital has been featured in all kinds of ghost hunting TV shows throughout the past decade. If there are ghosts in there, nobody has ever actually documented one. Still, that hasn't stopped thousands and thousands of visitors from all across the country coming in the middle of the night to try and spot a ghost or two for themselves. Number 9. Elda Castle. Elda Castle was once owned by the co-founder of Abercrombie & Fitch. You know, that preppy store in all the malls with all those tall pictures and models? It's like Hollister's cousin. Anyways, the castle was built on about 50 acres of land in New York State way back in the 1920s. Today, the mysterious castle is abandoned, empty, and, quite frankly, not looking too good. It has sold twice in the past 2 decades, but nobody ever lives there. The first time was in 2001 for $1.5 million. The second time was 10 years later for about $3.75 million. Talk about a booming real estate market. The castle was built for David T. Abercrombie and designed by his wife. They named their new castle Elda, which is an acronym for their 4 children. But what should have been a long life of happiness in a castle turned into tragedy. 1 year after completion, their daughter Lucy died in an accident. Then in 1931, 3 years later, David himself died of rheumatic fever. 6 years after that, his son died in an accident. The kids just kept dropping dead, and so the castle sat empty for years and years. It suffered damage from fires and was vandalized repeatedly. Nobody ever did live in the castle again, and now it's just sitting in the middle of the forest like a haunted manor. Number 8. Cuba's unfinished power station. There is a mysterious, unfinished nuclear power station sitting abandoned on Cuba's Caribbean coast. The ugly, broken, and never completed station is a bizarre monument to a time when Cuba and their friendship with the Soviet Union posed a serious threat for America. As you may already know, Cuba depends massively on imported fuel. Fidel Castro wanted to solve the energy crisis. Going nuclear really seemed like the best option, and with the power plant funded with Soviet cash, there was no real downside. The power station would be enough to propel Cuba into the 21st century. Construction got underway in 1963, with Cuba even building a new city just to house the workers for the plant. Naturally, the US was not thrilled. The nuclear plant would be just 180 miles from Key West in Florida, but it didn't matter in the end. The fall of the Soviet Union spelled disaster for what could have dramatically changed history, especially for the island of Cuba. The project was closed in 1992 because the money from Moscow vanished. At the time, the first reactor was about 97% complete. Just a little more time in Cuba would have had their very own nuclear generator. But now, it's just a creepy abandoned structure in the middle of nowhere. Number 7. The Virginia Renaissance Fair. The Virginia Renaissance Fair was a failed attempt at a kind of medieval theme park for nerds. Today, it looks like an abandoned village from the 13th century that archaeologists never bothered to excavate. It was open only from between 1996 and 1999, designed to be a replica medieval village where people could go to live out their fantasies, but whoever built this place assumed a lot more people would show up. After just 2 years, there were pretty much no customers. The owners had no choice but to close the park, lock the gates, and abandon it. All the structures were left to rot. Even today, the structures are still rotting. Everything is infested with ticks. There are dead animals everywhere, the place stinks like decay, and you'd have to be really brave to explore the dilapidated buildings. They may be standing right now, but they could fall over at any minute in a hail of debris and spider eggs. If the Virginia Renaissance Fair were still open today, would you dress up in your best medieval clothes and go check it out? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Tea for Two. About 300 feet from a hiking trail in Cumbria's Lake District, somebody abandoned a table and chairs, with tea for two laid out and waiting to be enjoyed. Ashley Cooper said that when she stumbled upon the tables and chairs completely by accident, she first thought it was an art installation, but it was pretty obvious upon closer inspection that somebody had recently set up their very own tea party in the middle of the woods. Half-eaten food was still on the plates, there were glasses of fuzzy wine abandoned, and there were even desserts that had gone uneaten. It looked as though a couple had set up their own private dinner party in the woods, then vanished into thin air before they could ever finish it. But that's probably not what actually happened. Ashley believes the table was probably set up by a pair looking to take Instagram photos. They were then too lazy to clean up after themselves. Either that or something incredibly more mysterious that I can't even speculate on happened in the woods. If the couple didn't leave behind their supplies, and I mean, who in their right mind would leave an entire dining room in the forest, then perhaps something nefarious went down. Number 5. Whispers Underground. A man with a camera was exploring one of the more mysterious abandoned places in Australia when he met a ghost. It's called the Waldeck Mine, and its history goes back 150 years. Men once toiled deep within the earth here, under the most brutal conditions as they searched for gold. But like pretty much every gold mine in the world by now, the Waldeck Mine closed and was abandoned in the forest canyons of Australia, left to its own destruction. Descending into an ancient mine is not a good idea. The urban explorer who filmed his adventure realized it wasn't a good idea when he wandered a little too deep into a tunnel and heard what he thought were whispering voices. And to be honest, I've seen the video. Unless he manipulated it using some kind of software, it definitely sounds like deeper down the tunnel was a small group of people whispering. Sure, it could have been the wind, but it also could have been the disgruntled spirits of miners still trapped in the underground tunnel. Suffice to say, the explorer promptly got out of there. Number 4. McNallys Island. McNallys Island, not to sound too presumptuous, is probably one of the most fascinating abandoned islands that you've never heard of. It's located in Nova Scotia, Canada. It's the biggest island in the Halifax Harbor, and local people don't even know it's there. At least, not all of them know it's there. The island was originally settled by the Britons in 1750, with the McNabb family living on it until 1934. But what's really cool is that the abandoned island today is filled with forgotten fortresses that were built throughout Halifax's history. There are also abandoned houses built by the original settlers in the 1700s. There's an old cemetery that still has the bones of the earliest island residents. The remains of a soda pop factory from a century ago can be found on the island. There are also over 3 forts and a battery, which was installed during World War II. You can even find the remains of an anti-submarine net that was strung across the harbor to keep submarines out of Halifax. Number 3. Burwash Correctional Center. The Burwash Correctional Center in Ontario, Canada doesn't really look all that appealing. It's a provincial prison that was abandoned a long time ago and has been gradually beaten down by the frigid northern walls. It first opened in 1914 and was so popular that a community grew around the prison. The prison inmates actually built housing for about 1,000 residents, all of whom worked at the prison or at the nearby farm. But by 1975, the world had moved on. The prison was outdated and too costly to keep running, so it was closed and abandoned. In the mid-1990s, most of the buildings were demolished. The only ones left standing were the main prison complex and the cemetery. The ghoulish cemetery was believed to have between 12 and 20 prisoners still hidden underneath the soil. But what's truly amazing is just how in the middle of nowhere this place is. You can't even reach it by car or SUV. The only way to get to the prison is to park on the side of the road near some railroad tracks and then bushwhack through the forest for about 2 miles. Number 2. Smrvyava. Smolensk is an old military base in closed city that was used by the Soviets. A closed city was a type of military encampment where soldiers and their families lived. Everyone inside was closed off to the outside world because of whatever military stuff they were doing inside. After the fall of the Soviet Union around 1994, many servicemen and pilots who had previously been located in East Germany were shipped to the base of Smolensk. At that time, the town had a population of about 4,000 residents. But then tragedy struck in 2008, with reforms that meant the airport was closed, the gas supply to residents was cut off, and nobody had any alternative but to pick up their stuff and flee. By 2010, the base and town were completely deserted. But the base is still filled with military equipment today, specifically military aircraft. There are plenty of Sukhoi Su-24s littering the crumbled base. A lot of the best stuff has been pillaged by looters, but the skeletons of the aircraft are still there, as well as their destroyed concrete bunkers. Number 1. Grand Island East Channel Lighthouse. Work on the Grand Island East Channel Lighthouse was supposed to start in 1867, but the drowning of the foreman in charge of the project caused construction on the lighthouse to be postponed until a year later in 1868. That summer, the lighthouse was finished and the first lighthouse keeper was appointed. In 1891, the lighthouse was struck by lightning, causing serious damage to the tower and the affixed house where the lighthouse keepers lived. Then, in 1898, storms had eroded the shore so badly that the lighthouse was no longer stable where it was. It needed to be moved at least 200 feet back from the water of Lake Michigan. As time went on, the lighthouse wasn't needed as much as it once was. On October 29, 1908, the lighthouse keeper lit the lamp one final time. After that, the lighthouse was left completely abandoned. It's been empty for over 100 years, but what's really bizarre is that in 1913, the lighthouse and its 44 acres were sold to 20 different members of a local moose lodge. Each of them controlled 1/20th of the abandoned property. Over the years, these shares have changed hands so many times that nothing has ever been done to preserve the structure. It's still sitting where it was a century ago, just collecting dust, all creepy and empty. Thanks for watching. What do you think happened to the folks having tea in the forest? Let us know any theories you might have in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more awesome videos like these. See you next time.